everybody for turning on your camera where possible. It does make a difference to see who is here and who you can actually connect with at another time. That is what the Bridge Club is all about. We want to connect, engage, and learn and grow as a profession. And so that is what we are here to do today. So we are going to begin our session now. Before we begin, a few items that I want to make sure that I'm going through. First of all, I did mention earlier, for those of you who had not heard me, is that the Bridge Club is the first virtual professional community to ever exist. This was being launched within the veterinary profession. This is specifically designed so that we as a community can connect, engage, and learn and grow together. What makes this really unique is the fact that this is only 25 minutes. For many of you, it's going to hit 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we're done. This is one of the things that we wanted to fit into people's schedules. We recognize this conversation can continue beyond that. However, our role here is to start the conversation. What we ask, as I mentioned earlier, is that one of the rules is that you all have a beverage, because we will be starting with a toast, which is really critically important to get us all engaged. The sheer number of people on today's call, we know, tend to filter in at a later point in time. And as a result, we've asked for you to do two things. One, turn the gallery view on your computer. It is in the upper right-hand corner, so you can see everybody's faces. You can scan to the next pages to see more faces. Second of all, we also want to be sure that we are using the chat function. So today, as opposed to on some of our other Bridge Clubs, we ask people to raise their hand to interject. I've asked for you all to stay on mute because of the sheer number of questions that we anticipate to be coming in. We will be answering them in order as they come through the chat function. We also recognize very wholeheartedly that this is a very, very passionate topic for many of you. And we love passion, but in 25 minutes, it's a little hard to get that passion to be, because it can overtake what we're trying to really accomplish today. However, what I do want to say to you is if you have a point of view that you really would like to bring forth, we ask that you reach out to both Brenda and I and propose a separate discussion. Today is purely a Q&A discussion regarding what the Veterinary Nurse Initiative is, but we foster and engage with passion. Just today is not that format for that discussion. What we also want to do is, for many of you, you have turned on your camera, and that is fantastic. 93% of all communications is nonverbal. The reason that we have our cameras turned on is we want to see your faces, and it is an opportunity to see who else from the community is here that you want to connect with as well. So with that said, it is my esteemed honor to turn this over to our host today, which is Ken Yagi. Ken is the co-chair of the Veterinary Nurse Initiative, and he is going to help answer our questions today. And then he does have a few additional folks that can help answer questions as well. So Ken, I'm going to turn this on over to you.
Okay, so as Catherine said—
Oh, wait, hang on, Ken, wait. Are you unmuted? Oh, I can't hear you, Ken.
I can hear him.
Well,
can't hear you. Can you hear him, Brenda?
I hear him.
Okay, so my name is Ken Yagi, as Catherine said. I'm a registered veterinary technician and a veterinary technician specialist in emergency critical care and internal medicine, practicing out of California. As a member of this ever-evolving profession, I'd like to propose a toast. I know that many of you have seen the profession go from being animal technicians to animal health technicians and veterinary technicians over the course of the 50 years that it's been in existence, and I thank you for all that you've done. I know that many of you have seen the profession go from and pushed for the profession to go from being designated to perform menial tasks to becoming the critical thinkers that are patient-focused and have become a vital part of the profession today. And I thank you for all you continue to do. I know that many of you guys are also feeling the challenges of the profession today and have entered this discussion of standardizing your credentials and becoming veterinary nurses. And I thank you for all that we're going to do. And so I'd like to have us celebrate how far we've taken our profession engaging in discussions to solve today's challenges, and working towards elevating the profession even further for the future generations. So please raise your glass.
Hi.
And join me as we look forward to new challenges, new successes, and to the future generation. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so the Vet Nurse Initiative. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my journey through the Vet Nurse Initiative. And it all started with me being appointed as the State Representative Committee Chair and attending this summit that we had, where we invited veterinary technician leaders to come. And we talked a lot about different kinds of things. But one of the things that we definitely talked about was how we solve the challenges of today. And when the question was asked, do we need to unite our credentials, standardize them, and change our title to veterinary nurse, there was a resounding yes in the room. This is something that we need to do. And that was my introduction to veterinary technician leadership. And so I've taken a look at that. Fast forward 3 years now, after we've had conversations with different states, more leadership summits, discussions with stakeholders, sending out surveys and getting feedback from each of these people, the NAVTA board decided and announced in May of 2017 that the Veterinary Nurse Initiative would move forward in order to amend the legislation in each of the states to standardize the credentials requirements, define scope of practice, have a established C requirement to maintain the credentials, as well as having people who are qualified to use this credential properly use it under the title of registered veterinary nurse. And when we take a look at the reasons why this decision was made and why these solutions needed to come in play was the 2016 NAVTA demographic survey. And one of the key statistics that we have that is very important is that when the respondents were asked, 56% of the respondents said that they had changed jobs over the first 5 to 7 years. And then of that, half of them had actually left the veterinary field. So we have a huge amount of turnover. The reasons why that turnover occurs that were cited for the survey were things like low wage, lack of respect, burnout, compassion fatigue, lack of value or credentialing that they feel, poor utilization in practice, lack of reciprocity, and poor public recognition. And so all these became reasons, and we started to take a look at how we could resolve these issues that we have in the profession. And so one of the goals of the Veterinary Nurse Initiative is to take a look at the current patchwork of credentials that we have within the United States, where we have licensed, registered, certified veterinary technicians, licensed veterinary medical technician, and one state without credentialing at all, and try to turn it into a single credentialed entire United States. So currently, veterinary technicians have varied titles in the United States. We have varying credential requirements that are associated with it. And the regulated job tasks that we have defined within the Practice Act is also different. And in some states, there's about 10 of them right now, where the term veterinary technician has no legal definition at all. So we don't exist in law. And so that's why it was important for the Veterinary Nurse Initiative to create a single title that we unite under, have proper credential requirements, have a defined scope of practice, and make sure that these titles were properly used by people who are credentialed. The other part of the Veterinary Nurse Initiative is to change our title over to veterinary nurse. And the main reason this is put forward is because as the profession has evolved, we've gone from being technicians that are associated with having expertise in the science and the technology that is associated with the work that we do. We're definitely experts in that. To being veterinary nurses that have a patient-centered model of care that we provide using that science and technology in order to use our critical thinking abilities, in order to push the patients through the care that they need, assessment that we make to guide them to healing from the diseases that they have. In addition to that, public recognition being one of the key issues that we have with our profession, the term nurse would definitely bring familiarity and expectations of the role that we play within the team. And it would give us the identity that we do play within the veterinary team. if we take a look at the entire world, the vast majority of the countries use the term veterinary nurse as well. And so in that sense, it'll bring standardization globally. So since we made that decision, we've gone through and talked to different media outlets, conferences. We've done online webinars, much like this one, and gone through our district representative system, the national district representative system, as well as the state representatives to try to get the information out, gather some feedback. We performed national surveys, and we've come to the point where we've set a plan that in 2018, we will be working in 2 states to make that change in legislation. And so now we're currently working in the states of Ohio and Tennessee. Throughout the time, we've gained a good amount of support from different entities. So we have 17 organizations that have now stated their position in support of the initiative. And specifically, I think the AVMA is of interest to people that the AVMA issued a statement in support of standardizing the credentials, the technician credentials, but remaining neutral to the title of registered veterinary nurse, with the intent that they would like us to tell the world what we want our profession to be called. And so so now we're at the point where we are working in each of these states. We do want to take the profession into our own hands and move forward in the way that we want to. And I know that there's a lot of questions surrounding this, that as much as we tried, we haven't reached every single person that wants to know all the answers to all the questions. And so let's get on with the Q&A so that we can get that going.
That's perfect. So we have a first one is from Jessica, who says, what can we do in our states, if anything, to help move this initiative along?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So in your state, if you're not in Ohio or Tennessee at the moment, there still is the working with the vet tech associations, having the conversation, working with the veterinarians, the veterinary medical associations in your state to have the conversation and make sure that they have the information that they need to make an informed decision about this issue. The one thing that I've learned over the course of the years is building good relations with people who are going to have the ability to make these decisions, voice their opinions about this issue. It takes a lot of time. And so it's not like we should be waiting around for this initiative to come to your state before you start working on this. And so I would reach out to the Vet Tech Association if they're not aware of this, which I don't think is the case at this point, but they will have some kind of a stance regarding it, or they would be looking for your feedback. So make sure you have that voice. The other thing that you can do is there is a national effort going on to show support of this initiative. So there are petitions that are being circulated. There are ways that you can have a productive and respectful conversation with people who may have questions regarding this or may not see eye to eye with us regarding why this initiative would be beneficial. And so we need your help to get the word out.
So we have a great question from Cynthia. Cynthia wanted to know, and I'm sure this is on many people's minds, what about the title protection for human RNs? She believes that the title nurse is protected. I know that's very common. And why not choose one of the current titles and just focus on that?
Yeah. Okay. So the nurse title protection first. So nurse title protection functions in the human medical space. And so when it comes to whether laws that are written for the human medical side has the ability to govern veterinary medicine, we actually don't think that's the case. And so there are definitely states that do have nurse title protection in order to protect the title that they have worked so hard to build up. And that's definitely true. And we don't want to encroach on that at all. But in terms of us being able to call ourselves veterinary nurses, it will always be veterinary nurse, not nurses, meaning that we're not professing to be treating people. And so it should not be an issue with the title protection itself. Now, the other part was, why don't we move forward with the title that we already have, one of the titles that we already have? And that comes down to the meaning of the word technician itself. Veterinary technician, over the course of the years, have continued to be a source of confusion for the public. When we talk to the public, and mentioned that I've had conversations with people where I say I'm a veterinary technician. I get a blank stare because they think, what does that technician mean? And when I explain that this is what I do, here's the task that I perform and the role that I play. One of the feedback that I got from somebody that really leaves a lasting impression for me is, is that he said, well, then why do you call it technicians? I thought you guys work with machines. And so there is when we want to promote the title veterinary technician as what we do and educate the public on how that profession works, it really becomes difficult because we have all these other technician professions out there in the human world that is educating the public against what we want to do. And so having a title that will more easily allow the people to understand what we perform because of other professions that are present, that's going to help us move the public education agenda forward. And so because of that, changing our title seems to be a better investment of our time and resources right now, so that we don't have to continue educating people generation after generation that no, veterinary technicians really aren't technicians. We're playing this nursing role.
So we have a great question from Henry, and I know this one has come up before too, of how will this impact the salaries of veterinary nurses that are currently all over the place? From state to state, it varies. From even in the same city, it can vary.
Yeah, salaries. Okay, so definitely low wages, one of the concerns that we have with our profession, and one of the reasons why we are not able to retain as many people as we want in our profession. So that's very important. The Veterinary Nurse Initiative, by being able to standardize the credentials and have a high standard that is set along with it, will increase the value of the credential intrinsically. And we'll continue to provide public education. We'll continue to provide resources for practices to be able to better utilize our technician, which will all lead to better utilization, profitability of the practice, which will then in turn to better pay for our profession as well. And so it's not necessarily that if we get a title change to pass in one of the states, necessarily mean that we're automatically going to get higher wages or something that's close to nurses or anything like that. But as the Veterinary Nurse Initiative as a whole, we're working towards raising the intrinsic value of the credentials so that we're able to work at that at a much faster pace, and it will eventually the wages will eventually go up. And I'd like to say that Heather is actually with us as well, one of the co-chairs of the Vet Nurse Initiative. And I'm not sure if you had something that you wanted to add to that.
She might be muted here. Hang on.
You are muted. Yes.
Unmute Heather. There we go. There you go.
No, Ken, I don't have anything to add to that. Thank you. You've done a very comprehensive job on that.
Okay, great.
So we do have questions. I do want to say, when you're seeing this in the chat, folks, I am getting private questions as well. So please note that I am doing these in order as they are coming through. Sonia had a great question with regards to, do you have pre-done language that is recommended for states to use in their practice acts to facilitate this?
Yeah, so I think what we're referring to here is what we typically call the Model Practice Act, that there is a Model Practice Act that is written by the AVMA, which is going through commenting period right now. The AAVSB is also revising their Practice Act model document to help with the language that has to do with veterinary medicine altogether, but also including veterinary technicians or veterinary nurses, whichever ends up being on those documents, which will serve as a model. The other thing is that, the states that we have currently we are working in, Ohio and Tennessee, do have a very well developed Practice Act, in that there is a good set requirement. There is some form of a scope of practice. Scope of practice is going to be a long-term process to try to make uniform throughout the entire United States, but they do have the scope of practice have CE requirements instituted. There is language that protects the title. And so it serves as a very good model for the rest of the states as well. And we can definitely fill in where we think that there's changes that could be made in the long term as we move forward. So just because we get this bill through that we have going right now in each of these states doesn't mean that we're done. We have more work to do moving forward, but we'll do it together as the state entities as well as the national entity supporting that as well.
So did that answer your question? Did that give you what you needed?
I think Sonia might be on mute.
Yeah, she is. I just wanted to give me a thumbs up if she felt that answered the question, or if there was.
Yes, it did. the model practice acts out there are fairly thin in what they recommend in that regard. So I didn't know if there was something specific that the Veterinary Nurse Initiative was hoping to get pushed through. And I guess maybe you addressed that in that I'm assuming you're starting with Ohio and Tennessee because they're favorable in this, or their language is more complete.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it, that their language is more complete. I think there is a little bit more to go. We do have an internal Model Practice Act document that we are still working on, but if we can endorse the AVMA's Model Practice Act, AVSB's Model Practice Act, at least in the veterinary technician or our professions area of the Model Practice Act, that would be a better way to go to have better impact instead of 3 different organizations putting out 3 different versions of Model Practice Acts that we all want to try to push towards. And so that's the route that we're going, and we'll see how that goes. We're still in that process. There are specific recommendations that we have drafted up regarding how the credential would be implemented, what types of people would qualify for the new registered veterinary nurse credential, and those kinds of things will be released as well.
So we have a great question here, and I think this is on the minds of everybody, and it comes from Angie. It was privately sent to me. How do we control non-credentialed individuals from calling themselves a veterinary nurse?
Yeah, the whole appropriate use of our titles for the people who are credentialed, and that's always been a big issue for our profession as well as other professions, and that definitely starts with the Practice Act having language that does protect titles to a certain extent. There are some states that have Practice Act language that also institutes fines for violating the part of the Practice Act, which are things that we're looking into that hopefully we can see what the best way from a legal standpoint we could implement that protection with. But ultimately, everything really does come down to our professional responsibility in that our profession itself needs to be able to advocate for ourselves and the other professions surrounding our profession, so veterinarians, also being able to educate, have assistants, veterinary assistants, go through the educational process that shows the difference between the two as well. And so that is an ongoing process. Enforcement of the Practice Act is a tough issue, and we're in communication with different organizations that have done this in a specific way that seems to take effect or have good effect, and we're gathering more and more ideas and information. And if you have any thoughts on that, where there are things that we're not doing that we should be doing, we'd like you to come on board and help us do that as well.
So we have a great question from Darcy saying, can you explain the partnership with these corporate companies? What is in this for them, and why are they supporting the initiative?
I'm sorry, the last part was why are they supporting?
Why are like Banfield, et cetera, supporting?
Why are they? Okay. Yeah. So currently we have companies like Banfield, Royal Canin, Blue Pearl, Veterinary Innovation Council, and MWI as sponsors for our initiative. And so that's how we fund our efforts that we have right now. And so I think the question, mainly focuses on some of the corporate practices maybe that we're looking at, because they're not all corporate practices that are sponsoring. But with that said, some of the key things, aside from exposure and the marketing that the sponsors do gain, I think, one of the common things that I hear from practice groups is actually that the non-standardized state of the veterinary technician credential is actually a huge headache for them, that they have practices all over the nation. And depending on the practice that they're in, one protocol won't be useful in others because of limitations or different kinds of supervision that technicians need to have in order to perform the same skill. And so and people who they can call veterinary technicians in one state might not be somebody that they can call veterinary technicians in other states. And so they suffer from the same kind of issues from the lack of standards and credentialing and scope of practice that we do. And so I think that's a huge motivator. But just in general, they definitely tend to support, they do support our profession. And that's very clear from all the different opportunities that are coming up for technicians these days.
So we have 2 minutes left, and I think our next two questions, and if Ken is able to stay on a few extra minutes, we can still continue on some of the questions, but we do want to promise all of you that you can tap out at one point here. But these next two questions from HAD002 as well as Michelle, both are pretty common. The questions read, is there a proposed timeline in which you hope to have the name change to be completed for all states? And then Michelle said, do you have any idea on the time frame you expect when you say long-term? Is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What are we talking about timing?
Yeah, so I think that how this first year goes will be telling of how long-term we will be taking a look at this for. But things are going well in both states at the moment, and we're very hopeful of that. I would think that by the first 5 years or so, we'll be working in a good number of states. It may take 10 years before we have what we would be able to call the majority of states on board. And that's where it starts to become a little bit fuzzier, and that it's hard to predict how long this is actually going to take. And so I would say somewhere along the lines of 5 to 10 years for the majority of work to be done. And then maybe some of the lingering states would take a little bit longer.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. So we are at our 25-minute mark. So this is where we do, if you need to go, you are certainly able to do so. Any question that is posted in the chat that has not been addressed, Ken will be doing a voice recording and he will be answering those questions. So the good news is, and we will be sending those out to all of the attendees so that you'll have access to any questions. For those of you that need to jump off, please feel free. Ken has agreed to stay on for just a few more minutes. We do have 2 additional questions on here that we'll be able to dive into, but I did want to make sure we, as always promised, this is the time you can exit off. Any questions, you will get those answers to those questions. So the very next question comes from Natalie. Will the new credentialing requirements allow for on-the-job or other schooling options as there currently are in some states? If not, what will that mean for the current credentialed veterinary technician who became credentialed through those alternative pathways?
Yeah, and so let's see. The recommendation that we're making for the states to move forward with regarding that, so we're talking about people who have been potentially grandfathered in the past, people who have gone through the alternate routes, is that anyone who has their credential to just have their credential transferred over to RVN. So if they're credentialed within that state, then they should be able to keep that credential, and that was the standard that was set at the time that they credentialed in, and that should continue on. The new standard for RVN as they come in would be that they should be an AVMA accredited program graduate that has taken the VTNE exam and passed it successfully, and that would be the standard that we set for the requirement for entry into the credential itself. And so as we have less and more people who are retiring out of the field that have gone through the other processes and new people coming in with the new standards, it's just the natural course of the progression of a profession that will eventually have people who have met the requirements being the ones in the field, but the people who have credentialed in with other methods shouldn't have their credentials taken away.
Okay. So on this last question that we have here, George, you've been asked a question. If you could potentially jump in, and then I would like Ken to also give his point of view, or even Heather. And the question came from Sonia, really wanting to play devil's advocate, right? What is the confusion or problem that the opposition will see with veterinary nurse that does not seem to occur with doctor or doctor of veterinary medicine?
Just a quick clarification, Catherine. I believe George was sharing the screen with Sonia, so he was asking the question of Ken. Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm with you. I finally figured that out. Sorry.
It's okay. I don't want to take credit for his ideas.
Just want to be sure Ken knows he's the one who's supposed to answer the question, not Sonia.
Okay. So that was a question to me. Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, so that's a very good question, and one that we're having conversations around in each of these states is that there is
Okay.
the claims from the nurses would be that it would cause confusion, that suddenly people would start walking into the veterinary practices and thinking that veterinary nurses would treat people. That seems a little bit unrealistic. So, so I don't think there's a huge amount of confusion. It's a hard one for us to understand, but we're still continuing to have the discussion with the nurses to see what we can do to make sure that their worries don't occur. What can we monitor? How can we help them make sure that that type of confusion doesn't occur? And that's the way that we're moving forward, is that to solve that concern, because even regardless of what we feel about the concern itself, it is a concern for them, and we want to help them alleviate that concern. And I think, Heather, if you want to jump in here, you might have a little bit more of an insight working in Tennessee.
Working through Tennessee with the senators, especially the senators have really tried to push the nurses on the subject, because the nurses have brought this up, and the senators continue to ask them to clarify, which they haven't been able to clarify how it will cause the confusion. So it has been nice hearing it from I would like to say as a third party, is the senators don't see that there's any confusion, and as they continue to push the nurses, I think that has cause the nurses to really think about what that position is and how it will create confusion. We also put forth in Tennessee that, there was a couple of ideas that we had to make sure that confusion didn't occur, such as requiring signs to be posted in the Tennessee clinics, indicating that they employ veterinary nurses that follow the specific set of skills and requirements, and that they see veterinary patients or animal patients and not human patients. So we're trying to, as Ken said, figure out how we can reconcile and really come to the middle and make sure the nurses don't feel that there's confusion there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we do have one final question, and Ken, you're going to love this one. Well, no, I guess we may have one more after that. Are there materials available to help this group here provide guidance to advocate in their states?
Yes, absolutely. We do have a website that's established called Veterinary. It's veterinarynurse.org that you can go to, and there is going to be consistent information posted regarding the progress of the initiative, as well as some of the news stories that are coming out, any resources that we would want to put out to the public, and the email address vetnurse@nafta.net is also a place that you can reach out to regarding that. Particularly if you're interested in supporting the initiative, there is a area on the website that allows you to pledge your support as well, so that you can be put on the list of supporters that we'll reach out to when we want material to be distributed to the rest of the nation. And so I think that I would definitely encourage people to have respectful conversations. I know there's a lot that goes on social media and such, that a lot of it is information. It's because the information hasn't gotten to them, and there's a little bit of a hearsay going on about what's going on, what the Vet Nurse Initiative is about, and we definitely want your help to help dispel that. And I found that even with the people who seem to be worried and very concerned about the initiative, when I have a sit-down conversation with them, and I've done so many of these at conferences to try to address their specific concerns, it turns out that there's a lot of fear that comes from not knowing the exact information, and we really want your help in getting that word out.
And special thank you to Henry for putting that in the chat. So if all of you didn't have it, you now have that there. And then finally, one of the questions was, in those materials, will there be information that can be passed on to other corporations to help them get on board? Is there any materials available that can also help get more support?
Yes. We definitely should create something for organizations that we can send out as a package. We do have the frequently asked questions document. We have that in brochure format as well. If you want to go to an event and pass out the brochure material, that you contact us and we are able to send that over to you guys. Definitely. So you can see that this effort is a pretty big effort that we need to put on. We do want your help in doing so, and anyone who has time to volunteer to help us get the message out, we'll definitely welcome that. So please reach out.
So with that, we are at our end. We want to thank Ken and Heather and all of you that participated in the Bridge Club. This is something that we do on a weekly basis. So you can always go to thebridgeclub.com/events to see what our next topics are. Due to the overwhelming nature of this topic, Ken has graciously agreed to do this again for us. So there are more questions that come forth. We truly, truly appreciate everyone coming on, turning on your camera. I know this is new for many of you, but this truly is the best way to really exchange ideas and for us to build really critical bridges for those conversations that need to take place in this industry. So thank you so much to everybody. Cheers. Have a great day. And thank you again, Ken and Heather, for joining us.
Thank you. Looking forward to more conversations.
All right. Thank you.